All right, welcome to the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast. Jacob Dahlin here, your host, and today's guest is from Brandon, Manitoba, Canada. Welcome, Darryl Wolski.
Thanks for having me on today.
Well, so let's do the geographical.
This episode is brought to you by Scanlux, your home for Scandinavian luxury products
Zoom,
for the U.S. market. You can find us at scanlux.com.
Well done, by the way. Yeah.
So it is not looking like that in Brandon, Manitoba today.
No, it is not. And I'm going to pull up my phone because some of my friends, they don't believe it when I say this. Where's it here? I don't know how to do this, but so right now for me it's 2:30 p.m. Central Time.
Yeah.
And by about midnight tonight, we're expecting 31 centimeters of snow.
So where is, for those that are in Sweden, because Canada is this big, vast country that nobody knows anything about, and I certainly didn't know anything when I lived in Sweden, where is Manitoba of all the provinces?
Well, I tell people, first of all, the Winnipeg Jets have always had a strong tie-in, especially in the old school days of the Winnipeg Jets. You know, there's the Lars-Erik Sjöbergs, there's the Thomas Steens, of course. Like Thomas Steen was, and he still is an icon. You know, and you have these iconic Swedes that would get drafted by Winnipeg, and they come to Winnipeg, and it's minus 40 Celsius, and like I said, there's 31 centimeters of snow coming tonight, and they're going, even though you're coming from a colder country, you're coming to this, and it's, and I tell people, like, we're like kind of like the geographical center of North America. For people maybe know where Minneapolis is, we're about 7 hours north of that, and 8 hours north, and even in Minneapolis, a lot of people don't know where that is. So, but the one thing.
To the west is Saskatchewan, and to the east is Ontario.
Correct. Yeah, well done, by the way.
Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna see if I can impress you here. Manitoba, also the home of William Prince.
I don't believe he is.
Oh, you have to, for everybody listens now, you have to go to Spotify, type in William Prince. He is a native of Native American folk singer from Manitoba. That is amazing. You have to go look him up.
I heard the name, but Prince is an Aboriginal Manitoba name. Like, so for people that don't understand the Aboriginal world, the name Prince, I'm just looking at him now. I knew who he was. I don't really know his music. This is really embarrassing now. So my hometown as a kid is a place called Selkirk. Selkirk is 30 minutes north of Winnipeg, and he's from Selkirk. So that's,
well, it's not like he's world known.
That's all. Like he's also 20 years younger than me, but I mean that's ultra embarrassing. So I didn't know he was from Selkirk.
No, that's what I did a little research here, and I thought I was gonna put you on the spot. But let's talk about before we get into your now let's jump into your background, and then we'll get into Thomas Steen, because Thomas actually before he came to Winnipeg, he played in my hometown Leksand, and also with another teammate because I know that you were an announcer in 1985 for Winnipeg Jets, according to your LinkedIn profile. So Bengt Lundholm.
That could be 85. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Bengt Lundholm, which also played in Leksand.
Yep.
There was two Swedes on that team. This other guy was on the team, Dale Howarchuk something. Never heard of him.
Yeah, just an average guy.
Yeah. Thomas Steen and his son Alexander Steen is still in the hockey business. When Alexander retired, they are now involved in on the east coast of Sweden with a organization called Sundsvall.
Right.
So they are still in the hockey business, so to speak. I was
going to tell my quick first Thomas Steen story. So when I first kind of got into the hockey business in Canada, we have you have major junior hockey. So for for the Swedish people, they'll understand, you get drafted in the CHL by London Knights, Brandon Wheat Kings, Vancouver Giants, Bay Como in Quebec, Halifax Mooseheads. So that's the CHL. And then below that is what's called Tier 2.
Yep.
And so like in Western Canada, there's the Penticton Vs, Brooks Bandits, Oakville Blades. Also, of note, Europeans can't play Tier 2 in Canada. That's a whole new story.
Yeah.
And then below that, there's what's called Junior B. So at the time, I was the president of a local Junior B hockey team. It's kind of when I got started in the business. And I said, we need to do a fundraising dinner. And the guy said, well, who are we going to call? I says, I'm going to call the Winnipeg Jets and see if we can get Thomas Dean to come as a speaker. So I called the Winnipeg Jets. We hired Thomas Dean to drive out, and he was a speaker. This may surprise all your Swedish fans and also Swedish. He was so shy and introverted. I was like, wow, this guy is really quiet. And, now after the fact, I've known Thomas since that point for like 25 years, and he is not shy and introverted no longer. But he wasn't a very good public speaker at that time, by the way.
Oh, that's good. That's good. It was a better name than he was speaker.
Yeah, and for me, it was all about marketing. It was all about adding some sizzle to the event, like number 25, Thomas Dean from the Winnipeg Jets. And people are like, wow, how did you get Thomas Dean? Like, they thought that was pretty impressive.
On that team also is a local guy that actually works on the staff at Liberty University and who played here in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I sort of live. Daniel Bertum, who
Bandit
played goalie.
Yeah, the Bandit. There was Daniel Berthiaume, it was Pokey and the Bandit. So that was the kind of like they had this, like at the time, really dating myself, like that there's Smokey and the Bandit, right? But at the time, like, the Winnipeg Jets came out with this marketing campaign called Pokey and the Bandit, and so Daniel Berthiaume was part of that marketing campaign.
Yeah, he actually at the end of his career he played for the Greensboro Generals here in what was back then the ECHL, and his kids he's on the staff at Liberty University and works with their ACHA program, which has been hugely successful, and his my son's team, we went up there for camps and these type of things, so we got to know the Berthaumes pretty well, and great family.
Yeah, and Daniel Berthiaume, for the short time that he spent in Winnipeg, was him and Pokey Reddick. So there's Pokey Reddick and Daniel Berthiaume, like really dating myself now. And the people are going to go, Daniel Berthiaume and Pokey Reddick, like, they're like, what are you talking about? But at the time, those guys, and if people are to go to Google Pokey and the Bandit, you're going to find a poster, and it's like some kind of bad Trans Am car in the background, and there's Smoking the Bandit was Pokey the Bandit. So, oh
man, that's awesome. That's awesome.
You mentioned that to Daniel Berthiaume, he's going to go, how on earth do you know Pokey the Bandit?
Well, let's go into your so you've been in the hockey business. Let's first start talking about, because if we go to LinkedIn now and look you up, you're going to be mostly known for being a hockey player agent with 2112 Hockey Agency, and also a family advisor with, I think it goes under the College Hockey Family Advisor banner, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And then AAA hockey. What is AAA hockey?
Excuse me. That's kind of where it all started. Well, other than the Thomas Dean situation. And actually, that's kind of where it all did start, with Thomas Dean, in a weird way. Like, why I'm sitting here with you today, it was kind of that idea with Thomas Dean, whatever that was, 30 years ago. And it kind of all starts. So what AAAhockey.com was, I thought at the time, I was kind of like, and I still believe today, like, what AAAhockey.com was supposed to be was a AAA hockey tournament. And so back in the day, like, once again, going back to guys, I'm trying to think of guys in Sweden now, they're playing, like guys like Brendan Shinneman and those guys, like when they were kids, they played in my tournament. And so, those younger, like the young Swede, like for the guys that understand in the SHL now, Nolan Zajac, who was in Sweden, Cody Kern, who was in Sweden, all those guys, when they were kids, like 11, 12, 13, they would play in my hockey tournament called the AAA Hockey Challenge. And it was in the summer. It'd be like a 4 or 5 day tournament. They'd play 4 or 5 games. And it was fun for those guys. It was back when summer hockey was fun. It's no longer fun now. Like summer and spring hockey, I don't care who watches this podcast. It is not fun. It is serious business. And today I had a team call me of 2015 borns, and the guy's asking me the caliber of the hockey. I'm going, your kids are 7. Like, what do you mean what's the caliber? Like, how good can the kids be if they're 7 or turning 8? Anyways, AAA hockey was AAAhockey.com started off as actually in the very, very initial stages was there was a local guy when I first moved to Brandon. There was a local guy had a summer hockey league. It was like a 4-team summer league. For anybody would remember the name Pat Falloon, guys like that were playing it. Pat Falloon was the number 2 draft pick to Eric Lindros back in the day, and those kind of players were in the league. So this guy, he was going to sell the league, and he said, "I got to move to Japan to go teach English." That's bizarre as it is, and would you like to buy the league? And so I'm sitting, where I sit now to where I bought the league is about roughly 3 blocks from my house. And I said, I don't know, like, what do you want for it? He goes, I don't know, $1,000. All right. So I'm back old school days. I pull out a checkbook and I go, okay, Mark Pilgrim, $1,000. There you go. And I owned what was called at the time the WSHL, which was the Westman Summer Hockey League. So Westman Summer Hockey League kind of morphs into being something a little bit bigger and a little bit better. And then so I had another guy say to me, he says, you should really do the same idea in the winter. And I says, I don't know if it'll work in the winter. And well, sure enough, it kind of grows and gets legs of itself, and it grows to 20 teams and 25 teams. And so it's kind of getting a leg. And then I don't know if you remember the name. They're called the Rome family. So there's Aaron Rome played in Dallas, Ashton Rome played in Greenville, and there's a bunch of Romes that played all kinds of pro hockey. So Dennis Rome, the father, he had this thing called the AAA Hockey Challenge, and Dennis says, "Would you like to buy it?" And so once again, I pull up my checkbook. I go, "What do you want?" And he goes, "I want $2,500. All right, $2,500. Boom, there you go. And now I own the AAA Hockey Challenge, which at the time wasn't a very popular event. So old school again, on the phone, faxing. Oh my God, I can't imagine faxing today. Anyways, faxing people, phoning, and spending hours trying to beg people to come to my tournament. So the tournament actually develops into like 100 teams, which was amazing to me. And so that's where AAAhockey.com came from. And then, that's kind of where the whole, being a hockey agent and being a family advisor, all those things kind of gave me the tools, I guess, to get to this point.
Yeah. And so what I wanted to talk about, I should have probably said this in the beginning, but I tend to go on rabbit trails anyway. I wanted to kind of talk about, because, for those in Sweden, what's it like to be an agent? What is an advisor versus an agent? Specifically, those in Sweden may not know. And then talk about, we can go into then how does it work with juniors in North America, specifically in Canada. And because we are getting, the lure of going over from Sweden to play collegiate here in the US or Canada, somewhat less in Canada, but specifically in the US. And then they realize, I'm probably going to have to play juniors. And then this whole meat market of different levels and different organizations opens up, and it can be complicated. So where do we start with that? Let's start with you as the agent versus advisor. What's the difference, and why have two different ones?
Well, it's to keep the NCAA happy. the NCAA likes the terminology of family advisor. And so the family advisor term is not just pigeonholed into hockey, it's to all 23 NCAA sports. So they have family advisors for water polo, for rugby, whatever.
So let me interrupt you right quick and explain the NCAA for those who don't know.
I kind of assume those things, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, and for the Swedes and the Scandinavians don't understand what the NCAA is, basically college hockey. And for people that don't understand the effectiveness or the importance of the NCAA is that this year, 38% of NHL rosters are based with NCAA players.
It's amazing.
So it's a huge number for people that go, it's all about, people say, you can play U20 in Breenis or Orebro and then think you're going to go from U20 to the NHL. Well, it's probably, unless you're a real superstar, unless you're some monstrous superstar. And even like, I'm thinking of a guy like, I remember watching Raymond when he was 17 or 18. And I was in Orebro watching him in Orebro, actually, and going, that kid's pretty good, but I mean, obviously he's turned into be a pretty good NHL player. My point is, majority of players don't go that way. I mean, like, for him to be, to go from the World Juniors and then all of a sudden playing Detroit Red Wings, that doesn't happen, right? Same with guys like Stutzel and those guys and that, Stutzel was lucky because he was also playing pro hockey playing for Mannheim. And I remember being at a Mannheim game and seeing different NHL guys there and going, why are they here? Like, why are they at a DEL game? Like, who on earth would they be watching here? Like, normally in the DEL, guys it's over, right? It's like guys are 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, and that's it. Guys like Kevin Clark, for example, who is really well known to SHL fans, guys like him, like, why did anybody be following Kevin Clark? No offense on Clarky, great guy. But I mean, normally for those guys, their careers are over. Like, is there any kind of up and coming icons? So I kind of diverted a little bit. So just first of all, when it comes to NCAA, the process of playing NCAA hockey as opposed to say playing in Canada in the CHL is much more difficult. And there's probably, there's upsides and downsides to both. And I'm not here to badmouth the CHL because I sure wouldn't. The CHL serves a purpose. So the only way a Swede can play in Canada, in junior hockey in Canada, is playing in the CHL. Now,
and explain CHL.
So CHL is what's called the Canadian Hockey League, even though there's American teams in it, but it's still called. So the CHL, it consists of 3 leagues: the Quebec Major Junior League, the Ontario Hockey League, and the Western Hockey League. So those 3 leagues comprise and they come together and they're called the CHL. So if you are if you're a Euro or you're a Russian and you have aspirations of playing junior hockey in Canada, the only way you can play is by being drafted by the London Knights or by the Brown Wheat Kings or Regina Pats, and you can play with Connor Bedard, or you can play in Vancouver or play in Portland or whatever it is. So those teams, they have 2 import spots. So you have to be one of the lucky ones out of those, so there's 2 import spots. There's roughly 66 CHL teams. So we're talking like 132 import spots in the entire country. So you got to be, I guess that goes to my point, is you got to be like a Slavkovsky, you got to be like a high-end player, even though he didn't play junior hockey in Canada.
So let's use a local favorite, Victor Rask, who came from Leksand.
Yep.
And who ended up being drafted, played for Leksand in SHL, got drafted in the import draft, and came in under Calgary Hitmans in the roster in the WHL.
Right. So a guy like Victor, for example, here's another really big thing to understand too, is the money part of things. So like a guy like Victor could sit in Leksand, and probably Leksand, I'm not going to speak for the manager of Leksand, I'm just guessing they probably would have paid him $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 to be in Leksand, right? Or euro, or maybe 500,000 kroner, right? So, but then meanwhile, a guy like, then Victor then comes, and this is where people are always surprised. when you play in the Western Hockey League, that's another story in itself. Is the Western Hockey League very closely watch how the players are treated, and I mean by that, I mean financially treated. So he's going to go play for the Calgary Hitmen. Go play in the Saddle Dome in Calgary. He makes about $150 a week. So, but it's a short-term loss for a long-term gain, right?
Yep.
So he's hoping that, okay, I'm going to go play for the Hitmen. I'm going to get on the radar screen, and I'm going to go then next year play in the American Hockey League, and then hopefully play in the NHL. That's the goal of playing in the CHL.
And he was already drafted by the Hurricanes at that time.
At that time. But I'm just saying that there's no guarantee.
No.
Excuse me. There's no guarantee. He's going to go from the Calgary Hitmen even to their farm team, the Charlotte Checkers. You know, is he going to go from at the time the Charlotte Checkers and then go up to the big team? Like, there's no guarantee of any of that. But the thing is, and there's a ton of NHL scouts in Sweden, but there's more scouts in the Western Hockey League in the O and the Q. So if a guy is, say, in Bjorklöven, for example, well, there's not too many scouts going up to Bjorklöven. So they're going to go, if I have a chance to go play for the London Knights or Winnipeg Ice or Vancouver, I'm going to keep using these teams for Portland or whatever. There's a ton of NHL scouts. Like, there's a dozen guys at every game. So more than likely, in Victor's situation, more than likely he was probably watched 30, 40 times a season.
Yeah.
Whereas in Sweden, he might not have been watched maybe 10 times.
And it certainly didn't hurt him that he put up some pretty stout numbers when he did come. In Calgary. I mean, I think I'm looking at his profile now. He was at a point per game in Calgary, which was, that was a big deal for him.
People have to understand too, the CHL draft. Here's the sad reality: is if you're not a drafted player, like a Lucas Raymond, for example, not that Lucas didn't play in the CHL, but unless you're a drafted player, your odds of getting drafted into the CHL import draft are very low. Like, for you to take up one of those two import spots, like there's lots of teams and leagues that don't have drafted guys. But I'm just saying overall, you got to probably be an NHL drafted player to then come, because I know I've been at the draft every year. So at the NHL draft, so what happens is all the CHL general managers they're going, Darryl, who do you got? Who do you got coming from Slovakia? Who do you got coming from Russia? Who do you got coming from Czech? Who do you got from Sweden, Finland? And I'll say, I got this guy, and they'll go, yeah, I don't know if he's good enough. And it's, these guys are all plugged in. Like, these guys, they know, like, if I say, hey, there's a guy out of Slovakia, his name is Slivkovsky, and they'll know, oh, that's the guy who played in the Olympics and he had 7 goals in the Olympics and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, their eyes light up at the chance of getting a guy like him, right? But that's the other thing too, is there's lots of guys like Slivkovsky, like a Lucas Raymond, that are going to bypass. They're going to bypass the CHL and they're going straight to the American Hockey League at the worst case scenario, or go right into the NHL like Slivkovsky did and like Raymond did.
Yeah. So what about the junior A's? So there you mentioned so if it's really, really difficult to come in to the CHL. So the junior A, so let's skip BCHL for a second because I want to jump to BCHL next. But in the AJHL, so let's say Brooks Bandits, right? They are a great program that puts lots of hockey players in the D1 area, or the CCHL, which is so if we went from west to east, the Saskatchewan junior, I mean, every one of them has a major, I mean, not a major, but a junior A program. But if you are now at a 2003 in Sweden and you say, I want to go play for the Brooks Bandits.
Can't be done.
But I really want to. Darryl, help me out here. Help me out.
First of all, if you're 2003, it's too late.
Yes.
So, I guess technically, I mean, this is being very technical. Say, for example, you had a son that's, say, a 2007. So he came to Canada and played in an academy, played in a prep school, he played at, say, Notre Dame, or he played at the Hill, or he played at some place like that, or he played in what's called the CSSHL, which is a prep hockey league.
Yep.
So he played for RHA, played for POE, played for Delta. If he played 3 years in Canada, then the rules change a little bit. So then all of a sudden you can become a Canadian hockey player.
Yeah. All of a sudden.
I didn't explain that very well, but it's like in the States, like in the States, if you play 3 years in a prep school, in some kind of a junior program, an under 18 program, an under 16 program, and you've played 3 years in the United States, well, now you're no longer considered an import.
Correct.
Now you're considered an American. But that's the thing in Canada, you like what I just explained by a guy who said 2007, he goes plays 3 years down the road in Wilcox, Saskatchewan at Notre Dame. I mean, those stories don't happen very often.
Now I've seen it a little bit more with the Russians, right? And that the Russians are starting to come over and doing that. But if you're looking at the Swedes, the alternative is, no, I'm playing juniors in Sweden. You know, why in the world would I go over and do 3 years of prep hockey? And let's face it, it's not free either, right?
It is not. It is, yeah. And that's another story in itself, is the costs that I think you get, like when I say sticker shock for euros, not just Swedes, but for all euros, and they go, it's $45,000. What? Yeah. You know what I mean? So then that's an eye opener for people too, when they're back home and they're paying nothing, right?
But now, so let's go into the BCHL, or the British Columbia Hockey League, right? Who broke out from the Canadian. So what is it? The CJHL?
So they parted ways, and for various reasons they parted ways, and they're no longer part of the CJHL, which is the Canadian body, I guess, that oversees Tier 2 hockey. So they've left, and they're going to do their own things. They may even leave Canadian hockey. That's being talked about. Yep. The latest stories I've seen is that the BCHL are going to expand. They're going to go from 18 teams to 20 teams. They're being their own entity. And here's the NCAA numbers is, on an average year, the BCHL has about 100 scholarships. They will have more scholarships in British Columbia than all of Canada combined. So, I've had various clients that have gone to the BCHL and had success. But say if you go to the Alberta Junior Hockey League, Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, Manitoba Junior Hockey League, and then all of Eastern Canada, all those leagues and provinces would never equal what BC's doing. BC on average will be, like I said, in that 100 scholarships a year. And like Alberta might have 35 or 40. Saskatchewan.
And why is that? Is that just because that league is that strong, right?
It's because the perception's there too. I mean, if you're a coach for, say, Western Michigan, and you're going, you know what, I want to go watch some kids. Am I going to go to Winnipeg, Manitoba, or am I going to go to BC? I'm going to go to Vancouver, where there's 6 teams in what they call the Lower Mainland around Vancouver area, and let's go watch Chilliwack, let's go watch Coquitlam, let's go watch, on and on and on. The talent level, because, and then the other thing is, like, and here's a Canadian rule. So, like, for example, when you're done grade 12 in Canada, you can go play anywhere you want in Canada. You're not, like, it's not like your property Alexandria and property of Brenus. Like, after grade 12 is done, you can literally go wherever you want in Canada. So that's, this year, it's like, for the players who are born in 2005. So I have some 2005s, they're in playoffs right now, but once their 2005 season's over, they can go play in BC. They can go play in Quebec. They can go play wherever they want. But if you're, say, a 2006 and you're in grade 11, you can't leave your province. You have to stay in your home province. It's a rule that is obviously for the Swedish people doesn't really matter, or for European people. But that's a Canadian rule that. So guys, like, so if they don't sign with a team, they can go play in the BCHL. So that's what a lot of guys do, is they wait till they finish their third year of 18U, and their 18U season's over. Now they're grade 12, they're graduated school. They can go to BCHL. They can go to the Alberta Junior Hockey League, where there's more scouts, where there's more profile. And, I know the people watching this from the Manitoba Junior Hockey League, Ontario, or from Saskatchewan, they're going, well, what's he talking about? Well, I tell people, it's like the movie Moneyball. The numbers don't lie. The math doesn't lie. Yep. So Saskatchewan will have 7 scholarships this year. Manitoba will have 6. Well, BC's got 100. Well, where do you want to be?
Yeah. Now, and all you got to do is go to Elite Prospects and do a reverse engineering on the NCAA. We're going to have a guest on in a few weeks that has done a good job kind of breaking that down. And you've seen kind of the postings on different sites of showing those numbers. So we're going to post those as well and kind of talk about it. And how do you use Elite Prospects to kind of reverse engineer to see, all right, if you want to go to college and play hockey, where do you need to come from, and how do you get there?
It's about hedging your bet too.
Yep.
I mean, it's about, like, once again, if you're say you're a good Austrian player, the chance of you being discovered in Austria is really slim. Or Switzerland. Those. I shouldn't say they're not your prototypical hockey countries, but when you think of Germany and Switzerland and Austria, France, you don't think of hockey. It doesn't jump off the page. It's not like it's a Scandinavian country and it jumps off the page at you. But I mean, in those countries, they have to find a way. Well, how do I get? You're from Villach, Austria. How do you get noticed? You can do videos, and you can have guys like me make phone calls on your behalf. But at the end of the day, like Andy Murray, he was Western Michigan head coach. Andy Murray always had a great line. And Andy says, I'm not going to give this kid a $200,000 scholarship unless I can see him face to face, and not over a Zoom call, but in person. I want to be able to see this guy and go, okay, I feel good about giving this guy a $200,000 for years. And what I mean by that is, normally speaking, schools will cost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. And then you times it by 4. Well, all of a sudden you're $200,000, $250,000 real quick.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of those, I shouldn't even say old school, a lot of coaches, they want to be able to see a guy in person. So my point is, they're not going to just give a kid over the phone a $200,000 scholarship from Villach, Austria, or from Graz or whatever place in Austria. They want to be able to see this guy in person.
But do you think that BCHL may? I mean, if there's one place in the Canadian Junior A's that may open up for Europeans in the future, that's probably where it's going to be.
I totally agree, and and then they're in a position where they're in a position of strength, right? So, like I said, whether or not the BCHL is part of the CJHL or part of Hockey Canada, irrelevant.
Yep.
As long as the talent comes from there, as long as the talent will come from there, that's all that matters. Yep. They don't care about, well, you're part of Hockey Canada, you're part of the CJHL. Nobody cares. But you're from Providence, you're from Merrimack, you're going, I don't care what this league is part of. I like that kid. He's got good grades, good family. I want that guy.
But now, so let's talk about the 03s, 04s, 05s now that are coming from Europe. Sure. Let's say Sweden, since this is the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast.
Right.
So, all right, now I'm not going to be looking at, okay, I can't go to Brooks Bandits. Man, great program. Can't go there. And right now it's locked up, even the BCHL. So, and the ship has sailed in terms of coming early. So the alternative then is going to be to go play in the US.
There's the options in the US are infinite. And even me, who works in this business, from 7 a.m. to midnight every day, it's confusing for me. So if you're sitting in Brynäs, as an example, or you're sitting in Skellefteå, you're going, or you're in Gothenburg, you're going, how, for some, you're not even in your, you're not in your own country. So now you're talking a different country with 10 different leagues to pick from.
Yeah.
And which is the league to go in. And like this is like an hour discussion in itself. So, but I'll try and make this simple. At the end of the day, the USHL, is by far the number one league.
Yep.
And number one in various reasons, not just scholarships, but the amount of professional attention that it gets. Like you can go to middle of nowhere, Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, and watch the Lincoln Stars in this dumpy arena that they use for rodeos. But I tell you what, at night when the lights go out and the hockey players come on the ice, it's a fantastic place. But it's as old school as it gets. And I'm saying it's a rodeo facility. It is that. So, and they convert it to hockey at night and on and on and on. But anyways, there's probably a dozen NHL scouts there.
Yeah.
And they're in nowhere, Nebraska. Like I shouldn't say it. Lincoln's actually a great city. Yeah. But in that whole Midwest region of the USHL, so you have up the road, there's Omaha, then down the road, there's the Tri-Cities team. And then there's like
Cedar Rapids, which is in Iowa, right?
Yeah. And then there's Sioux Falls, and then there's Fargo Forest. A lot of those, what I call the Midwest teams, are very strong organizations, strong ownership as well, too. The USHL is more of a geographically condensed league than, say, my next league, which is the NAHL. So the NAHL is the North American Hockey League. And if you look on a map, like it is like from way in the east to New Mexico, to Texas, to North Dakota. So, I mean, in North Dakota, there's two teams in North Dakota, Bismarck and Minot, and then South Dakota. Actually, South Dakota, doesn't have a team anymore. But anyways, the NAHL is a much bigger, broader geographical league. But also, too, a lot of those teams, they don't really play outside of their division to cut down travel costs.
Yeah.
The NAHL is always, so not to confuse things, trying to make things easier than they can. So USHL is considered by USA Hockey Tier 1. The NAHL is considered Tier 2. Probably at the end of the day, it's really irrelevant if who's Tier 1, Tier 2. So the NAHL will have, on average, they're going to advertise about 275 scholarships this year. They also have over 30 teams, whereas USHL has much less teams. They'll have about 200 scholarships. But my point is, between those two leagues alone, there are going to be about 500 scholarships.
Yeah.
Whereas in Canada, the entire country of Canada maybe had 175.
And when you go to the roster of any USHL team, it's hard to find a team that doesn't have almost 100% of them with college commitments, D1 commitments.
So, for example, in Fargo, North Dakota, when you walk into the Shields Arena and you look up on the wall, they'll have like kind of their wall of fame. So they'll have like the roster, the 2021 Fargo Force, and boom, roster goes down. You look at the wall and you go, and there'll be the odd guy that doesn't have an NCAA logo beside his name. And so Kerry Eads, who runs the team, I'll say to Kerry, I'll go, why does that guy not have a logo? And that guy goes, wasn't academically smart enough.
Correct.
It wasn't like the guy wasn't, from a hockey standpoint, good enough. But here's a valuable thing. Like the NCAA, and this is not just a hockey thing, this is a sports thing. You're considered a student athlete. And that's an important thing for people to know. For Swedes, it's not really, you don't run into that issue really with players being not smart enough for college hockey. That's not a Swedish issue. But on average, it happens lots where players are not academically strong enough to be in the NCAA. And in the hockey industry, and the NCAA hockey is not a billion-dollar business like football or basketball. So what I'm saying is, even though the NCAA will never say it, you got to think that in football, when you have a guy who's, say, Trevor Lawrence, who's a Heisman winner, and I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence is a smart or a dumb guy. I don't know him. But say, if he is a starting quarterback for University of Alabama, there's different rules for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, but meanwhile, a hockey player, you could be, you can be the next superstar. You could be Nick Lidstrom, the next superstar, Nick Lidstrom from Sweden, to go play for University of Maine. Well, Nick Lidstrom isn't going to get the same treatment as Trevor Lawrence does.
Yeah.
And, and it's just a financial thing. So anyways,
but we just had a Jacob Rodin on who plays in the GMHL with Bradford Rattlers, who was telling everybody about, well, yeah, I'm in the middle of taking my TOEFL test and I'm doing the NCAA clearinghouse. I think they call it something else now. It used to be called the clearinghouse.
Yeah, that's correct though.
Yeah. So he is, he came over playing a year so GMHL is kind of in between junior A, junior B, right?
Well, that's that. I didn't even talk about that because I didn't want to go down. I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. So
I'm sorry.
No, the GMHL is they try as a company and as a league, they try hard.
Yeah.
The problem is they're considered a renegade league, and they're not. They have private insurance, but I don't know if too many scholarships coming from the GMHL just because they're so off the radar screen.
Yeah, and there certainly is a big difference top to bottom within that league, but it is an avenue to be able to play as a European, to be able to play in Canada.
Yeah, but I would say those people, like, it's a mistake. If you're a European or a Russian, even though when you look at the GMHL rosters, a lot of them have 10 Russians on it or 10 Czechs. And I think why those people, and I'm almost certain of this, because a lot of the Russians and the Czechs and the Eastern Europeans, they'll go, "Why? I'm playing hockey in Canada. I'm playing junior hockey in Canada." Are you, though? You're playing like basically junior C hockey with no chance of advancement. And that's why I tell people you're better off in the States playing in a lower end junior league like the USPHL, the EHL, the NA3. Those are leagues, to me, at least you have some chance of getting to the next level. Like if you're a goalie, for example, in the GMHL, they're carrying 4 goalies. So if you're a goalie, you're hoping that the starting goalie breaks a leg, and then you hope the backup goalie breaks an arm, and then maybe you're going to get a chance to play. That sucks. It's like and you're paying the same amount as anybody else, but you're the 4th level, you're the 4th goalie on a team. What's the point? So
let's switch and talk about the other little bit of the which is, it's interesting now because it's changing a little bit. You have and that is the USPHL organizations, but specifically the NCDC, that we're seeing the Midwest. When this airs, we'll have right before you will be already people been listening to about the Pueblo Bulls, who are moving from the USPHL Premier into the NCDC. So did the Utah team. I think there were 6 teams that are moving up into the NCDC. Right. So let's talk about that league versus North American Hockey League.
Well, the NCDC is, in a weird way, kind of similar to the GMHL. And what I mean by that is it's considered the outlaw league.
Yep.
However, the NCDC is producing results. And so the NCDC last year, I think they had maybe 20 Division I scholarships. Not great numbers, but you could combine 3 leagues in Ontario, or you could combine Manitoba and Saskatchewan. They won't have those numbers. So the NCDC, my apologies here, the NCDC is owned by the USPHL. So the USPHL as a company owns USPHL Elite and Premier, my apologies, USPHL Premier and Elite, and the NCDC.
Yep.
So they own all those 3 leagues. So the NCDC now has going to expand this year in what they call as the Mountain Region, which is Pueblo, Provo, Utah, Colorado, Coeur d'Alene, and I'm missing another one. There's one more team. So there's 6 teams. They're going to expand to make the Mountain Region. They call it the Mountain Division. The Mountain Division will now become NCDC. And to me, the NCDC is just going to expand more and more and more. Various owners of USPHL teams, they kind of complain about the NCDC to me, and I won't say which ones, but they complain. They say that they bankroll the NCDC. So this is another interesting topic in itself. Is people say, well, what does it cost to play? Well, the NCDC is free. NAHL, tuition free. USHL totally free. You don't even pay for billeting in USHL. You don't pay for a stick. Like if you're going to play for the Omaha Lancers, you're going to play for Darryl Wolski, you're going to show up with just your underwear and your socks. Everything else will be provided. They'll probably provide your underwear if you wanted to, but the NAHL, you don't pay for anything other than monthly billeting fees. And so depending on the city, depending on the state, could be $350, $400, $450 I always tell people it's a write-off, and it's if the kid's going to be living at home with you in Canada or Sweden, probably paying $450 a month for food for that kid anyway.
Yeah.
And then the NCDC is the same thing. Doesn't cost anything to play in NCDC, only it's monthly billeting fees. Then when you go, so now those are what's called the tier 1 and tier 2 leagues. Then you go down to tier 3, and this is where it becomes really confusing. So now people say, what's the best tier 3 league? I tell people all the time, it's not really the league, it's the team. There's so many really good USPHL teams, so many good NA3 teams, and so many good EHL teams, and there's so many awful USPHL teams. I mean, like the difference in ownership and caliber of talent is just so like really good or horrible. You know what I mean? Like it really is. And so like there's some teams, they over recruit. They'll have say 27 players. Well, it's a business too for these guys. So the average player, say, playing on the, I think Frank Scarpacci, who runs the Florida Eels, does a great job. But say you're going to go play for Florida Eels, it's going to cost you about 10 grand.
Yep.
Some teams could be 12 grand. Some teams could be 8 grand, and I'm talking US dollars. So, so basically, that's what's going to cost, which isn't really that bad. But where it can get expensive for people from overseas or from Canada is, say the player is, say, 17 or 18 years old. He's going to have to go to school, and then you have to enroll into a school. School could be $7,000 because you need a visa. If you're a Swede or a Finn or whatever, you're from Norway, you have to have a visa to be able to play. And the only way for the young guys, not for the older guys, for the young guys, they need to get a visa from that school. So it's like when you see young Swedes like going to play tier 1 hockey in the States, they have to go to a physical, not an online school. They go to physical, what I call brick and mortar school. They have to go to school because that school then applies and gets the visa for that guy to be on a visa and be on a student visa in the United States.
And trying to get a work visa is even harder.
Oh, that's literally impossible. But again, like to get that student visa, like I said, if you're a 16 or 17-year-old and you're going to go play for Maine's U18 program or U16 program, or you're going to go play Shattuck St. Mary's, you need to attend school. You can't do online school. Whereas in junior hockey, if you're an 18-year-old and you're playing USHL, NHL, you can do online school.
Yeah, and I think that it's a little bit easier for those that are at that age because they can still go in under a high school program. But if you are the 20-year-old that has already graduated in Sweden, it's a little tricky.
Yeah, but normally speaking, if you're, say, a 20-year-old from Sweden and you're going to go play in the USHL, schooling isn't an issue. So the team will then do the paperwork, immigration. No different than a Swede that wants to come play in the East Coast Hockey League. You want to come play in the East Coast Hockey League, you want to play for Rapid City. They do the what's it called, a P1. I think it's a P1 immigration visa, and they'll do the application for you. Same thing USHL for, say, a 19 or 20-year-old Swede that's not going to school. They'll do the immigration on behalf of that player.
And I just posted reposted something on LinkedIn from one of my buddies at Above the Glass who broke down the immigration for you to want to go and want to know the different immigrations here in the U.S. Go look at Above the Glass on LinkedIn, and there's some really good articles that Alex have posted in there. So let's finish up here. Let's talk about all of this kind of, if they didn't think it was complicated before our podcast, now we really made it complicated.
We've totally blown people's heads up.
Yeah.
I talked to a Swedish family the other day, and they're from Malmo region. My mother, by the way, is Swedish. Her name was Skoglund, and so my mom's family was from and I always pronounce this wrong, Ängelholm.
Ängelholm, yeah, that's where that's where Rögle, I think is Ängelholm. So my mom's area from around there. But anyways, I always tell I'd like to talk to the Swedish family the other day, and I tried to explain, the process of what's going to be for them, to get to the next level. And I always say, like, everybody has a different path, and you hear that all the time. And I truly believe that, and I use Nick Lidstrom all the time.
if you're Nick Lidstrom, the path for him was probably totally different from Lucas Raymond, or for Henrik Lundqvist, all those amazing Swedes, they all had different paths, and so that's what I'm saying for people. There's just not cut and paste. It's not a cut and paste way to play hockey. To get from junior hockey to college hockey, it is not cut and paste. It's you probably need, regardless, you're going to hire me. I have a Swede that works for me. His name's Kita Nielsen, and Kita's a guy that helps me and helps with our Swedish people as well too. I'm in the process of looking, by the way, for any Sika Swedish agents. I'm looking for a new Swedish partner, by the way, a little shameless plug. I had a guy that he's gone to work on for a bigger agency, and great guy. So now I'm looking for a new Swedish partner, by the way.
Yeah, Keda, he works there in Sundsvall with
yes.
Steens.
Yes. So
he's a pretty big fisherman too, by the way.
I've seen his Snapchats and stuff. So and I hope that's not my goal here today, is to make people's heads blow up and that. Because it is difficult, and you really truly do need help from somebody excuse me, on this side of the ocean, for sure.
And I think that because let's face it, the North American Hockey League guys, we had I just had Mike Bloom on, and we talked about this issue of aren't you watching these players in Sweden? And the answer is no. We can't, because there's 1,000 players in Sweden playing juniors, and we're only interested in the ones that want to come over here. So for us to spend time looking at the people in Sweden, we just can't. So they don't even have a login to Swedish Hockey TV to be able to look at people, because it's frankly a waste of time. And
and that goes back to the Victor Rath story. Like a guy like Victor, why would an NAHL team try to get Victor? There's no point of him. He's not going to go play. He's not going to go play across the border for me, Minot Minotauros. No offense on Minot. They're, by the way, a great organization, one of the better ones.
Yeah.
But he's not going to go play there.
No.
He can stay home and make 40,000-50,000 euro or US dollars. Why would he do that? And then he goes from Calgary to the American Hockey League, and the American Hockey League, NHL. It just financially doesn't make any sense.
No. And I think that's why. So when people from Sweden are wondering, well, aren't they noticing me? I've posted a lot of stuff about my profile. No, they're not noticing you.
They're not.
And so therefore, the Swedish players are going to have to come over and get in touch over here. And certainly, can they come over here and go to camps and try to get noticed? Yes, but it's a minefield, and there's a lot of different organizations you got to watch out for. And I think that there's a lot of people that you got to watch out for as well, unfortunately.
One thing I should have brought, that's a very important thing to notice, is the amount of imports allowed in each league. Like the USHL allows 6, the NAHL allows 4, NCDC
plus 1,
0.
Yeah, but that includes the Canadians.
That does include the Canadians, and includes the Russians, and includes the Czechs, and the Latvians. The Latvians are really their visibility, and the amount of players that are in the NAHL and USHL, the Latvians and the Czechs and the Slovaks has really increased a lot. And not low end players. Like you see a lot of goalies now that are import goalies that are coming in, and they're dominant, and they're also like you go look at the NCAA top 5 goalies, half of them are European.
Yeah.
So but that's an important thing to know too, is like, if you think you're a good player and you want to play in the NAHL, you got to take one of 4 spots. Like they can.
You better be a top 2, top liner or 2.
You got to be in the top 2 pairings on defense. You got to be the starting goalie. You got to be in the top 6 forwards.
Yeah,
because they can find a 12th or 13th forward in Duluth, Minnesota.
No, absolutely. So, and I think that you can come over here and make the roster, but keeping that roster spot is not easy either. And if you're in the North American Hockey League or the NCDC, what's the alternative if you're now not, if you're taking up a roster spot and you're an import, guess what's going to happen?
But you know what, you brought up one important thing about a half an hour ago and I didn't talk about it, was there is other ways to play college hockey, and not all roads lead through the NCAA Division I. And
I'm glad we're going here.
There's Division III, which isn't a bad option. Like, I've had guys play Division III who've gone on after that. I have a guy, and people can Google him. His name is Mike Hedden. Mike Hedden played Division III, and he grinded it out through the minor pros and states, and then he got to the American Hockey League. He was the top scorer in the American Hockey League one year when the Texas Stars won. He went from there. He went to the KHL. He went from the KHL. He went to Germany, and then he played for Asset-Pori in Finland, and then played in UK. And now he's a coach in the OHL for the Oshawa Generals. My point is, you can get success. People think, oh, I'll go play D3. Like, I had a Slovakian kid the other day say, if I don't play D1, my career is over. That's not true. Because here's one thing people have to understand is, say, for example, you're the 13th forward on a University of Maine. How much ice time are you getting? You're getting like 4 minutes. Maybe you're playing every second game. Whereas you can go play the good D3 program and play tons and play 28 minutes and play in the power play or be the starting goalie. All of a sudden, you got some numbers, you got some stats. And the other thing people always forget about is, here's one thing I didn't really talk about, is you mentioned Liberty. So like the ACHA to me that isn't part of NCAA hockey, but they call in the United States, they call it club hockey. So ACHA, for a lot of guys that say play tier 3 hockey and they want to still playing and going to school and still playing hockey, ACHA is a great option. And I know it's not as cool, it's not as sexy, but you know what? The guy who plays in Hockey A10 in Sweden, he's probably not good enough to play for Rogla. He's not good enough to play for Frölunda. He's probably not good enough to play in Allsvenskan. So he plays in the Hockey A10. My point is, stay in your lane, play it to your caliber. I don't want to tell people like, oh, what about your dreams and goals? Well, sadly, your chance of playing at the NCAA Division I, if you're in tier 3 hockey, you're never making that jump. Never. Well, I mean, I don't know who's done it.
And I think the other part about it, if your dream is just to continue to play hockey and you don't want to play in Hockeyettan in Sweden, ACHA versus D3.
Sorry, I pronounced that wrong, by the way. Sorry.
No. You did excellent. I give you props for that. Yeah. ACHA versus D3 at the top level. So take Adrian College or Liberty. When you go into their facilities, they're incredible. And if you play D1 at Liberty and you play for Kirk Handy over there, it's an incredible program. Not for everybody, but it's an incredible program with the most beautiful rink you ever seen. And you go in their locker room, and it's like an NCAA D1 program there. Now, here's the other part about it is the tuition there, they have a lot more ability to give financial aid packages that, because they're not part of NCAA, that NCAA D3 makes it a little bit difficult to do. So you may be having to pay 30, 40 grand in college tuition at the D3 level of NCAA. Adrian College, Liberty University D1 club hockey is a good option.
Well, and here's the thing. So oddly enough, last week, when you fly to Las Vegas, you fly from this little place in North Dakota called Minot, and Minot's home of the Minot Minotauros, but it's also home of their ACHA team. And the Minot if you look at the ACHA rankings, Minot's like a top 5 program.
Yeah.
And so they get like 2,000 fans out. There's a college students show up, they're drinking beer, it's a party, it's a college experience. And then you go, like I said, then I flew to Las Vegas, and then there's UNLV's ACHA program that is equally as good as a lot of the lower end Division I programs.
Yeah.
And I even saw from anybody who's been to Las Vegas, you get bombarded with advertising and logos and names and images everywhere. I even saw them advertising in Las Vegas, and they are a big deal there too. So I tell people, like, yeah, sure, you're going to ACHA or not going to Division 3 or Division 1, but it's not the end of the world. You can still come out of those places with a great education, and then maybe you're not going to play for the Philadelphia Flyers. Maybe you're going to go back and you're going to go play for Esbjerg Energy in Denmark.
Yeah.
Which isn't the end of the world.
And you can continue to play for 4 years, 5 years, maybe.
Yes.
And then if you still want to play hockey after that, you may be good enough that you can play in Allsvenskan or Hockeyettan, but really shine, because now you're 5 years older than you were with a Hockeyettan or Allsvenskan sniff.
But you don't have to play in Sweden, though, either. Like I said, I mentioned Esbjerg.
You can play in France. You can play in Austria and Germany and
sure. You can play
England.
You can play in the third league. Play Oberliga in Germany. You can play. It doesn't have to be in Sweden. You can go play Nemestus and go play in Finland. But all these leagues look for certain types of players, though, too. And I know this is a whole new podcast. Like you mentioned England. I would say it would be very hard for a player coming out of Division 3 or coming out of ACHA to go play in England. They're looking for a certain type of player. They really, and this is another podcast altogether. If you look at teams like the Guildford Flames, you look at Nottingham, you look at Belfast, they look for Canadian players. They look for guys who play Canadian school. So this is a whole new subject again. So there's in Canada, the college is called U Sports in Canada.
Yeah.
And so the national championships are going on right now for U Sports. There's Calgary Dinos are playing Alberta, and Dinos beat Alberta, but both those teams are going to the nationals. My point is, you can be a Swede and play in U Sports.
Golden Bears, right?
Oh, U of A, Golden Bears, well done. And so I've had Allsvenskan teams call about one of my clients on that team. That his name is Dawson Davidson. He's a defenseman on the Golden Bears, and there's been teams already from Allsvenskan call me about him. But my point is, that's a great point. Is like you can come play. Maybe you want to come to Canada and play U Sports. You probably, if you're good enough, you'll get recruited to play in Canada in U Sports, and it's not the same. What's the word for it? It's not as sexy as playing in American colleges. Yep. Like you mentioned University of Alberta Golden Bears, which they play in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. They get 1,500 fans, 2,000 fans to their game. Whereas, say, where I live, University of Winnipeg, University of Manitoba, Bisons, they're lucky to get 130 people at a game. Yeah. It's really pathetic. And the team doesn't do well. They play out of a tough rink to park at, on and on and on. There's lots of problems with it. But you can go play in the East Coast, like University of New Brunswick. You can play Acadia. There's some really good programs. There's St. FX, really good programs in the East. And, you get a full scholarship. And actually, some of these teams will find jobs for the players and stuff. Like Canadian University Sports, like U Sports, as it's called, is one of those, what I call hidden gem. And people don't give it the credibility and that it deserves. And for a lot of Canadians players, and they have the chance to go play D3 for $40,000, or go play in Canada, play for University of Calgary for nothing. Well, they go play Canada. Yeah. Because playing D3 is not D1, right? So, yeah. I mean, it's all semantics too. Like you can go play for Stonehill College, which is a new Division I program. Maybe not that sexy. It's obviously not as sexy as North Dakota or Denver or Boston or Michigan or whatever. It's not the sexy name, right? And you can come back to Canada, go play for University of Alberta. And then, like I said, all of a sudden, Bjorkloven, for example, calls me about Dawson Davidson and go, what's he going to do next year?
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up this. And I think we're going to have you back on and talk a little bit more of different things. There's a few years of stories behind it. But what's the best way for people to reach you? They have questions. Maybe they are unsure about what does a family advisor do? Do I need an agent? Do I need an advisor? What are my options? Am I any good? These type of things. What's the best way to reach it?
CHFAhockey.com. So college, basically, or CHFAhockey.com, or we can also come through my pro site, which is 2112 Hockey Agency. And a question I get all the time, and this is my last story for you. So when
That's all right.
About 20 years ago, when I started 2112 Hockey Agency, my partner at the time said to me, he says, why 2112? And it says, no, it was originally supposed to be called 5150. And he goes, have you Googled what 5150 meant? I said, yeah, I know what it means. I said, why then? I said, it's the name of the best Van Halen album of all time. So that's why I wanted to call it 5150. But if you search the terminology of what 5150 means, it means a lunatic is on the loose. And so that's what it really means. Like when the police in California go, we got a 5150, the lunatic is on the loose. So then he says, no, you got to change the name. I says, I'm going to go. And if you find my ATM card, my ATM card code was 2112, which is the name of an old Rush album in Canada. So Rush is famous Canadian band, and so I always loved Rush. And way back in the day in the 70s, Rush had an album called 2112, and so that's how the name 2112 has evolved. And so now over the years, 2112 has evolved. Now I have an entertainment division. I represent a couple guys on Netflix shows, and 2112 is now a hockey group. And so 2112 is like the overseeing body of everything. So but to answer your question, for people to get a hold of me, it's easy to find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all over Facebook, or you can contact Kita as well too for the Swedes that want to talk. Maybe they want to talk to somebody who speaks Swedish, and you always talk to Kita as well too.
Yeah, and Kita is, for those who don't know, is Keda. Is how it's spelled. So, Darryl, thank you so much it's been fun to just talk hockey. It's what we are passionate about, and now you can go out to the fishing hut and build a fire out there, and
I don't do those
crack
things.
open a Labatt Blue, and
I don't drink that beer either, by the way. Just for the record, I'm a Crown Royal guy, so that's my thing. Crown Royal or Grey Goose, that's my two things. And yeah, I in my entire life, I've never been into a fishing hut. I've never been to one of those stupid things they put on the lakes and the rivers, and people, they take an auger and they dig this hole in the water and they want to go catch some stupid catfish.
You're missing out, my friend. You're missing out.
I'm not missing out. I got Netflix to the left of me, and I'm happy with Netflix, and I got Wi-Fi. I got my ice machine here. I got my fridge over here. I'm set up.
That's good. That's good. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll have you back on, and we'll talk some more Canadian hockey, and we'll find a good excuse to have you back on.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks.